This conference will now be recorded.
So yesterday, till yesterday, whatever we had done is we had developed these APIs. We had developed three APIs over here. The APIs we had integrated them by using the choice router and the scatter together over here. So today, since we are just going to see regarding this error handling session over here. So let me test the connection with the starting point. Just taking some time. Let me cancel it.
See, usually
So here, so it is taking some time in order to resolve everything over here. Just a couple of minutes. Let me create the project in 5 minutes since the previous workspaces are throwing some exceptions.
Hello, Mahesh.
Yes, I'm there.
Hel- Ah, okay.
Just give me 5 minutes. I'll just create the
Okay.
total project, okay? Whatever we are.
Okay. Okay.
about the API which we had developed yesterday, until yesterday. Okay, so today what we are just going to see is we are just going to see the error handling session. Okay, and I am just naming exception.xml file. So we are just going to see the flow level exception and the application level exception over here. Sudhir and Ram, can you hear me and can you see my screen clearly?
Yes, Mahesh.
Okay. Sorry for the delay. Actually, there was some issue with the Anyone Studio logs. Okay, that is the reason I created the total project again. So here, wantedly, what I am just going to do is I am just going to create a flow where it will be throwing exception for us. It as an Excel. Under the advanced, I am just using the get method in order to get the total data as our response. So under the set payload connector, wantedly, I just want to give an expression where the Mule expression language cannot understand it. And it will throw the exception directly. See here, we are having a red bar. And under the logger, we are just going to apply the payload. Okay, let me deploy this project over here. Let's proceed. So whenever we are requesting it accordingly, first the HTTP listener connector will be able to listen the request, and since it is throwing the exception, that exception will be logged in the logger. Then again, in order to display the response, it will revert back to the HTTP listener connector itself. And let us see what is the exception it is throwing. So whenever we are receiving the responses as well, okay, let me go for localhost colon 8081 / except is our end bar. And here it is showing the exception, whatever the expression we have written over there. Okay. So this expression cannot be understood, and where the responses will be received under the HTTP listener connector. So there is a column called responses. So this normal response is nothing but the successful response. So if we are not having any of the exception in our flow, so whatever the payload we are receiving from the connector, okay, that payload will be displayed as our response. But if it is throwing any of the exception, so what is the description of that exception will be displayed. Okay, if I don't want to display the description of the exception, if I just want to display error.cause over here. So I had saved it. So our application has been started over here. Let us check whether our response will be changed or not over here. Here the response has been changed. As you can see here, the response is in the text plain format and it is displaying the cause of the error now, error.cause, as you can see here. And if I just want the response in the application JSON format. So the error responses can be received by here. So if I had changed the format of the response now into application JSON, now it is, as you can see, it is displaying it in the application JSON format over here. So now if I just want to display a static message, okay, by using some of the conditions. So these are the options which are available for the error handling. So on error continue is an exception, like where it will display the exception as a successful response. On error propagate is a failure response, where it will be displaying the failure responses. So I am just dragging and dropping the on error propagate in the error handling option. So whatever the response I just want to receive here is, I just want to display it for the user says, I don't want to display the internal exception which is caused by the API. So I had saved it. Let me check whether whatever the response we will be getting the response whatever we had configured there in the on error propagate set payload connector. So here it is displaying the same response. So whenever we are requesting it according to the HTTP listener connector, it will move to the set payload connector. Since the set payload connector is throwing the exception, it will move to the on error propagate. Since the on error propagate, in order to propagate whatever the response we had configured, this will be picked by as our response. But in the end, okay, the responses will be listened by the HTTP listener connector here. So in order to display the response of whatever we had configured in the on error propagate connector, so we just need to pick the payload here. So this payload is nothing but whatever the error response which is picked from the on error propagate connector, that I just want to display it as our response. There is an error in the exception of the flow. So what is the purpose of on error propagate? Whenever we are facing any of the exception, here we can apply the conditions as well. Okay, if we are having if it is satisfying this kind of condition, we can drag. I just want to display this message as a response for the users, and we can drag and drop a number of exceptions over here. For example, if I just want to drag on error propagate option, so I can drag and drop it based on the conditions. Whatever it is satisfying, it is able to pick it. The conditions I'll just display it for you. But as per now, in this flow, whatever we have developed, are you having any doubts for the exception? Sudhir and Ram?
Hello, Mahesh.
Okay. Ram?
No, no, Mahesh.
So, guys, whenever we are having any of the exception in our flow, then only it will be moving to the on error propagate. If you are not having any of the exception in our flow, the on error propagate option will not come into the display. Okay, our application has been started over here, and since we are not having any of the exception outflow, it is displaying a normal response. So now, since we had seen the on error propagate option over here, I just want to develop another flow over here. Okay, in this flow, we'll be seeing the exception while connecting to the database. Under the advanced, I just want to use the get method, total data as a response. I am just going to drag and drop the select connector over here. So I don't want to disturb this database configuration, whatever we have configured here. So under this global elements, I just want to create a new database configuration where I just want to configure the credentials wrong. Instead of MuDB, I am just naming it as an MuBD. So when we are testing our connection, it will throw the exception. As it is throwing the exception over here, and I just want to configure the same and save it. So I just want to pick the database configuration one over here. So let's start from transform message factor. Since it won't be displaying any of the response, but I'll be just configuring the transform message connector. So whatever the payload we are getting, I just want it in a JSON format and applying the logger over. So our application had been started and we can move to the browser in order to check the response. Yes, it is saying the URL whatever we are connecting is not perfect. So here the error responses were received by the same again. Here this is the error response. Now in this flow what I just want to do is I just want to use the on error continue, not on error propagate. So the on error propagate will be used to pick the error responses and the on error continue is used to pick the successful responses. Okay. Okay, let me save it. So it is displaying the response whatever we had configured. So whenever we are facing any of the exception in our flow, after the completion of total flow, the on error continue will be able to pick the exception. Okay, and whatever the response we had configured here, okay, that will be picked as a successful response, not the failure response. So when we will be using the on error propagate, when we will be using the on error continue, if we are having any internal exceptions in our flow, okay, that means like we cannot fetch the data or something, bandwidth error, those are the internal exceptions. For example, if we are moving to a buy any of the product in Amazon or something, so if there is no exception from our website or our product, but there is insufficient fund or the bank is unavailable, so these kind of exceptions can be picked by the on error continue over here. That is the reason whatever the responses we had configured by the in the on error continue will be picked by the successful response. Again, the failure responses are below, as you can see. So if there is any exception in our flow, then only it will be coming into display. If there is no exception in our flow, it will be displaying the normal response. Yes, in this way. If there is any exception to our flow, and if I just want to display it as our successful response, so this on error continue will be picked. So whenever, what is the difference between on error propagate and on error continue? On error propagate is nothing but whenever we are facing any of the exception in our flow, it will break the flow there itself, and the on error propagate will be picking the response. And the on error propagate will be picked as a failure response. And the on error continue is nothing but after the execution of total flow, if there is any of the exception, so then it will be picking the response, and this on error continue response will be picked as a successful response. As I can display it in the Postman for you as well. What are the status codes it is receiving? The on error propagate and on error continue. Now I just want the exception here. See here, this is on error continue. The status code is 200 OK. That means a successful response. And if you are moving for on error propagate, 500. If you want to change the status codes, how we can change the status codes? So I can add a set variable connector here. I'm just naming it as an HTTP status and naming it as an I just want to display it as an 400 status. And since this propagate will be making the failure response, I am just going for the failure status codes here. Whatever the variable we had created as HTTP status, I just want And exactly in the same way, we can do it for this on error continue as well. So I just want to display it as a 201 status code. And in order to display it as our status code, since the on error continue will be picking the successful responses, we just need to go for the successful status code. Here, if you are just moving for the status codes now, if I am requesting it, see here, 400 is our status code. We are whatever we had changed. 201 is our status code. Any doubts in it? This is flow level exception. Okay, whatever we had seen. Okay, just a moment, guys. So now we will see the application level exception over here. And for it, I'm just going to create the global.xml file, new Mule configuration file, naming it as a. Till now, whatever the exceptions we had seen are flow level, which are handled in the flow level. So here, for whatever the flows we had not handled the exceptions. For these flows, we had not handled the exceptions now, right? So if I just want to handle the exceptions for these flows, how can we? So now there is an option called error handler. So this error handler is very important whenever we are just moving for it. So here we will just check the possible errors for the united flow here. What are the possible errors for the united flow? If we are just moving for the request connector error mapping, so here these are the possible exceptions. If there is HTTP connectivity exception, Okay, for example, at the starting point, I am just dragging and dropping the on error propagate. So I'm just dragging and dropping this on error propagate over here. So I just want to drag and drop the set payload connector in it. So if there is an exception while error while connecting it. Okay. So here if it is satisfying the HTTP connectivity issue. Then it will display this response. And if it is not satisfying this condition, then it will come to the next one based on the conditions whatever we had applied. Whenever we are facing the exception, we will be facing it in the flow itself. So I just want to configure if there is any sort of error. Okay. And in order to consider this flow as a global exception flow, we just need to move the flights, global elements, and create. In the global configuration, there are configuration properties, not configuration properties, sorry, configuration. So here there is a default error handler. Since we had created only one default flow, so that flow is persisting here. And now this flow, whenever for whatever the flows we have not handled the exceptions over here, for all those flows, it will move to the global error handler option over here. And here it will be displayed. been deployed over here. So for example, if you are just requesting it according to United destination LAX, we are able to get this data as our response. And if I am requesting it according to Hyderabad destination, is not available. So what it will do, it will go for the global except error handling option there, and it is displaying this. Okay, since this condition is not satisfied, there is no connectivity issue, so it is coming to the next one. And since we had configured it, if there is any sort of exception, I just want to display this. So that is the reason why it is displaying over here. Any doubts in it, Ram and Sudhir, for you?
No, Mahesh, no.
Okay, guys, if you are not having any doubts, today or tomorrow we will be moving with the data wave language. Okay. So we had seen flow level exception, application level exception, and how to configure global exceptions as well.
Okay, Mahesh.
Okay. Thank you, guys. Bye.